After many miracles and teachings across the region of Galilee, the fame of Jesus Christ continued to grow. Crowds followed him everywhere. Some came to hear wisdom, some came hoping for healing, and others came simply out of curiosity. But among those crowds were also people who doubted him and even feared his growing influence. Walking on water. One evening, after teaching thousands of people near the Sea of Galilee, Jesus sent his disciples ahead in a boat while he stayed behind to pray. Night fell, and a strong wind began to blow. The disciples struggled to control the boat as waves crashed against it. Suddenly, in the darkness, they saw a figure walking toward them on the water. At first they were terrified, thinking it was a ghost. But then they heard a familiar voice. "It is I. Do not be afraid." It was Jesus. One of the disciples, Peter the Apostle, called out to him, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus replied, "Come." Peter stepped out of the boat and began walking toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and waves, fear filled his heart, and he began to sink. Jesus quickly reached out and saved him. Then they both climbed into the boat, and the wind became calm. The disciples were amazed and said, "Truly you are the Son of God." Healing everywhere. As Jesus continued traveling from village to village, many sick people were brought to him. People suffering from blindness, paralysis, and other illnesses came hoping for help. Again and again, the stories say Jesus healed them. One day, friends carried a man who could not walk to the house where Jesus was teaching. The house was so crowded that they could not enter. So they climbed onto the roof and carefully lowered the man down in front of Jesus. Seeing their faith, Jesus healed the man and told him to stand up and walk. The man rose to his feet and walked home, praising God. The crowd was amazed. The raising of Lazarus. One of the most powerful miracles in the story of Jesus involved a man named Lazarus of Bethany. Lazarus lived in a village near Jerusalem with his sisters Mary of Bethany and Martha of Bethany. One day Lazarus became very sick. His sisters sent a message to Jesus asking him to come quickly. But before Jesus arrived, Lazarus died. When Jesus finally reached the village, many people were mourning. Lazarus had already been buried in a tomb for 4 days. Jesus went to the tomb and asked for the stone covering it to be removed. Then he called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." To the amazement of everyone there, Lazarus walked out of the tomb alive. This miracle shocked many people and strengthened the faith of Jesus' followers. But it also increased the fear and anger of some religious leaders. Growing opposition. The religious leaders known as the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin began to worry. They believed that Jesus' popularity might cause unrest and challenge their authority. Some of them began discussing ways to stop him. Meanwhile, the crowds continued growing. Many people believed Jesus might be the promised Messiah. The journey to Jerusalem. As the time of the Jewish festival Passover approached, Jesus traveled toward Jerusalem with his disciples. This journey would become one of the most important moments in Christian history. As Jesus approached the city riding a donkey, crowds gathered along the road. People placed palm branches on the ground and shouted praises. This event is known as the triumphal entry. For many followers, it seemed like the beginning of a new kingdom. But the days ahead would be filled with betrayal and sorrow. The Last Supper. During the Passover festival, Jesus shared a final meal with his disciples. This event is remembered as the Last Supper. During the meal, Jesus broke bread and shared it with them. He told them the bread symbolized his body. Then he shared wine, saying it symbolized his blood. He told his disciples to remember him whenever they shared this meal. But during this moment, Jesus also revealed something shocking. One of the disciples would betray him. That disciple was Judas Iscariot. Betrayal in the garden. Later that night, Jesus went to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed quietly while his disciples rested nearby. Soon, soldiers arrived with Judas. Judas identified Jesus by greeting him with a kiss. Jesus was arrested and taken away. His disciples scattered in fear. The trial. Jesus was brought before religious leaders and later to the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. Pilate questioned Jesus but found no clear crime. However, the crowd demanded punishment. Finally, Pilate allowed the execution to take place. The crucifixion. Jesus was taken outside the city of Jerusalem to a hill called Golgotha. There he was nailed to a wooden cross. This painful execution method was known as crucifixion. For hours Jesus hung on the cross. His followers watched in grief and sadness. Eventually, Jesus died. His body was placed in a tomb carved from rock. A large stone was rolled across the entrance. For many people, it seemed like the story had ended. But according to Christian belief, the most important moment was still to come. The resurrection. 3 days later, early in the morning, women who followed Jesus went to visit the tomb. To their surprise, the stone had been moved. The tomb was empty. According to the Bible, Jesus had risen from the dead. This event is called the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus appeared to many of his followers during the following days. Their fear turned into courage. They now believed their teacher had conquered death. The beginning of a global faith. After these events, the followers of Jesus began sharing his message across many lands. One of the most important missionaries was Paul the Apostle. From small groups in Judea, the message spread across the entire Roman Empire. Over centuries, Christianity grew into one of the largest religions in the world. Today, billions of people follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. His message of love, forgiveness, compassion, and faith continues to inspire people everywhere. After the incredible event known as the resurrection of Jesus, the followers of Jesus Christ were filled with both amazement and confusion. Just a few days earlier, they had watched their teacher die on a cross outside Jerusalem. They had believed everything was over. But now the tomb was empty. Something extraordinary had happened. The first witnesses. Early in the morning, a group of women who followed Jesus went to visit the tomb where his body had been placed. Among them was Mary Magdalene. When they arrived, they saw that the large stone covering the entrance had been moved. Inside, the tomb was empty. According to the Bible, an angel told them that Jesus had risen from the dead. At first, they were frightened and confused. But soon, the news began to spread among the disciples. Jesus appears to his followers. Soon after, many of the disciples began reporting that they had seen Jesus alive. One of the most famous moments involved two followers traveling on a road toward the village of Emmaus. As they walked and talked about everything that had happened, a stranger joined them. They did not realize at first that the stranger was Jesus himself. Only later, when they shared a meal together, did they recognize him. They were filled with joy and rushed back to Jerusalem to tell the others. Doubt and faith. Not all of the disciples believed immediately. One disciple named Thomas the Apostle said he would not believe unless he could see Jesus and touch the wounds in his hands. Days later, Jesus appeared again while the disciples were gathered together. He invited Thomas to touch his wounds. Overwhelmed with emotion, Thomas finally believed. This moment became a powerful story about faith and doubt. The final teachings. For the next 40 days, Jesus appeared to his followers many times. He spoke with them, shared meals with them, and continued teaching them. He encouraged them to carry his message to the entire world. One of his most famous instructions is known as the Great Commission. Jesus told his followers to go to every nation and share the message of love, forgiveness, and faith in God. The disciples realized that their mission was only beginning. The Ascension. After these final teachings, Jesus led his disciples to a place near the Mount of Olives. There, according to Christian belief, Jesus blessed his followers. Then something remarkable happened. Jesus was lifted up and disappeared into the clouds. This event is known as the Ascension of Jesus. The disciples stood watching the sky, filled with wonder. Their teacher was gone, but his mission had been passed to them. The birth of the early church. The disciples returned to Jerusalem and waited together. Soon another powerful event occurred. It is remembered as Pentecost. According to the Bible, the Holy Spirit filled the disciples with courage and strength. They began speaking to people from many nations. Thousands of people listened to their message and chose to follow the teachings of Jesus. This moment is often called the beginning of the Christian Church. The mission of the apostles. The apostles began traveling to different lands to spread the message of Jesus. Among them, Peter the apostle became a key leader in Jerusalem. Another important missionary was Paul the apostle. Paul traveled thousands of miles across the Roman Empire. He preached in cities, villages, and marketplaces. Even when facing persecution and imprisonment, he continued spreading the message of Jesus. Slowly, small Christian communities began appearing across many regions. From small movement to global faith. At first, Christianity was a small and often persecuted movement. Many early believers faced danger for their faith. But their determination and belief continued to spread the message. Over the centuries, Christianity grew across continents. From the Middle East to Europe, Africa, Asia, and eventually the Americas, the story of Jesus continued reaching new people. Today, billions of people around the world follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. His message focuses on love, compassion, forgiveness, humility, and hope. The legacy of Jesus. More than 2,000 years later, the life of Jesus still influences history, culture, and faith. Churches, books, art, and traditions across the world tell the story of his life and teachings. For believers, Jesus represents the path to God and the promise of eternal life. For historians, his life remains one of the most influential stories in human history. And for many people, his message of love and forgiveness continues to inspire kindness and faith every day. The sun slowly rises over the ancient cities of the Mediterranean world. Merchants open their shops. Roman soldiers march through stone streets. Ships arrive at crowded harbors carrying spices, silk, and travelers from distant lands. The world is changing. But somewhere in this vast empire, a small group of followers carry a message that will change human history forever. A message of hope. A message of forgiveness. A message of love. That message was about Jesus Christ. And the people who carried this message were once afraid. But now they were fearless. The mission begins. After the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus Christ, the disciples gathered together. They remembered every word he had spoken. They remembered his miracles. They remembered his sacrifice. But most importantly, they remembered his command. Go into all the world and preach the good news. So they began to travel. Village to village. City to city. Nation to nation. A dangerous world. At that time the world was ruled by the mighty Roman Empire. The empire was powerful. Its armies controlled lands across Europe, Asia, and Africa. And the empire did not easily accept new religious movements. Followers of Jesus Christ were often misunderstood. Many people believed they were rebels. Others believed they were dangerous. And some leaders feared that their message would change society. The rise of the apostles. Among the followers, some became great leaders. One of them was Peter the apostle. Once a simple fisherman. Now he became one of the strongest voices of the new faith. Peter spoke with courage. He preached in crowded streets. He taught people about forgiveness and salvation. Thousands began to listen. Thousands began to believe. A new messenger appears. But the story was about to take another dramatic turn. A man named Paul the Apostle entered the story. At first, Paul was not a follower. In fact, he once tried to stop the spread of Christianity. But everything changed after a powerful spiritual encounter. After that moment, Paul became one of the greatest missionaries in history. Paul's epic journeys. Paul began long and dangerous journeys across the ancient world. He traveled through cities like Jerusalem, Antioch, and Rome. Sometimes he walked hundreds of miles. Sometimes he sailed across stormy seas. Sometimes he was welcomed. But many times he faced rejection. He was beaten. He was imprisoned. He was threatened. Yet he never stopped. The message that changed hearts. Wherever Paul went, he shared the same message. He spoke about love. He spoke about grace. He spoke about redemption. He told people that salvation was not only for one nation, but for the entire world. This idea was revolutionary. For the first time, people from different cultures, languages, and backgrounds were joining the same faith. The growth of the early church. Slowly, small communities of believers began forming. They met inside homes. They prayed together. They helped the poor. They supported each other like family. These communities became known as the early Christian church. At first they were small. But their faith was strong. And their numbers kept growing. Persecution begins. As the movement grew, so did opposition. Some Roman leaders saw Christianity as a threat. One of the most famous rulers during this time was Nero. During his reign, many Christians were arrested. Some were imprisoned. Some were executed. Yet even in the face of persecution, the message continued to spread. Faith stronger than fear. What amazed many historians was this. Persecution did not destroy Christianity. Instead, it made it stronger. People saw the courage of believers. They saw how they refused to deny their faith. They saw how they forgave even those who harmed them. And many people began to ask a powerful question. What kind of message gives people this kind of courage? The turning point. Years later, something extraordinary happened. The Roman Empire itself began to change. One of its emperors made a historic decision. His name was Constantine the Great. Constantine ended the persecution of Christians. Christianity was finally allowed to exist openly in the empire. This moment changed world history. A faith that reached the world. From that moment forward, Christianity spread across continents. From Europe to Africa to Asia, churches were built. Scriptures were copied. Missionaries traveled even farther. The message that started with a small group of followers was now becoming a global faith. Final reflection. The story of Christianity is not just about the past. It is about a message that survived persecution, empire, and centuries of change. A message that continues to inspire billions of people today. And it all began with the teachings of one man,